Welcome to Stupa series number 5, Stupas in Time and Space. So today we will cover the history of stupas, how they developed over time and in different countries. And we'll go in details about the type of stupa we are building in Diamond Mountain. And I'm a little bit disappointed. Nobody discovered on my beautiful picture Yoda. Maybe you take the time now to find him. Let me know in the chat when you have found him. And then I would say the power is with you, Hanli.
Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everybody. And today I'm going to start our journey telling you about this really unusual stupa called the Golden Stupa. And there's a picture of that coming up right now, that no one really knew how this got there. But it's about 7 meters high. I think it's about 25 feet. On top of a rock that's also about 7 meters high, and no one knows who built it or how it got there, but I thought it was a really interesting way to start our journey today with something most unusual. This stupa is built in Myanmar, and although we don't know very much about the stupa at all, there is one stupa that we do know about, and that's the oldest one that was built in India. This is the Great Sanchi Stupa in central India. It's one of the earliest stupas that we know about, and architecturally, it's the prototype for every other stupa that followed. We believe it was built about 2,500 years ago by King Ashoka out of brick. And the actual first part was much smaller. It expanded to twice its size a little bit later by them building another piece around it. A little bit later, in about the 12th century, the monument fell into disrepair and was in a very bad state. Then in about 1818, a British general found it and luckily started restoration work later in 1881. The restoration was finished in the early 1900s, and this is now part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is the oldest stupa that we know of, and the first one as far as we can tell. The next one, which was also quite interesting, was built a few decades or eras later, the 4th and 5th century. And this one is very interesting. You'll notice that the shape is a little bit different. And it was believed to mark the place where Buddha first met a group of 5 ascetics who later became his disciples. You'll notice that it's a regular shape and it goes up in these tiers. And originally it was decorated with sculptures of the Buddha. That little piece at the top, that right at the top that you see sticking out, that was added on later by some minister's son in the Mughal period in about 1588. And this one is also in India. So you've noticed that there's a change in the shape between the first and the second one. This kept on happening. Stupas changed in shape throughout time and also changed between countries. So even though it started with this dome-like structure, and I'll show the progression for you, like a bell shape, and that's the picture you saw in the first one, it very quickly progressed to this more terraced, multi-storied shapes that you saw in the second example. And so you will notice not only over time did it change, but it also changed between countries. And I'll show you further examples of these changes in different countries as different cultures started building stupas and bringing their architectural ideas to it. Now, Sunam has a very interesting story about this bell-shaped stupa, and we're going to show you a real example of that in the next slide.
The story goes like this. The disciples asked Buddha, what should they do when he left Earth with the remainings of his body? And the Buddha has not answered in spoken words. He simply took his folded shawl and put on top of it, upside down, his begging bowl. And so it is said that this is the structure which then the disciples used for the stupa where the remaining ashes of the Buddha's body has been stored. Is, I think, not the correct word, I'm not sure. And so you can see these are the steps at the bottom in the picture and the shape of the begging bowl.
I think that's such a great story. So keep your eye out for that shape all along, because in the next picture we'll show you that that shape remained, but suddenly it developed architecturally and got raised off the ground, and these layers were added. But the basic structure remained, and the basic idea remained the same. In this very beautiful picture, you'll also notice that the terraces are very practical to use, for example, for ceremonies. And you'll also notice that there is space to walk around the stupa, to circumambulate the stupa. And this is really a meditative practice that people who do pilgrimages would typically do, and we hope that they are going to be doing that also at Diamond Mount. One of the last examples I'm going to show you is that of the changes across cultures. And here you'll notice that these more multi-storied terraced stupas that you would typically perhaps find in places like Japan or Vietnam remain still the same in concept, but has included the cultural architecture. You'll also notice that the name of a stupa changes. So in some cases it's stupa or pagoda, and Venerable Sunam will share all the different names with you as well. I would imagine that the ultimate stupa is the one called Bhumi Sambara. Now, Bhumi Sambara is typically known as Borobudur. This was a stupa that was magnificently built as a stepped pyramid. And the temple is orientated in the 4 directions and then expanded vertically across in accordance to Buddhist cosmology to represent the universe. There are 4 entrances and 4 complete steps, and the 4 sides point in the 4 cardinal directions. east, south, west, and north. When you look at it from above, it actually takes the form of a giant mandala. And it was designed and built according to stories in the sutras. This is also for pilgrims, and the monument itself guides pilgrims through an extensive system of stairways and corridors, and there are reliefs, which are these shapes that are in the rock or on the building that tell stories as well. It's divided into these 3 levels: the world of desire at the bottom, the world of forms in the center, and the world of formlessness right at the top. So the outer courtyard and the foot of the base represents the lower realms. That's where mortals, humans, animals, and demons are. And that's where we are still blinded by our lust and desires and not living the right way. It's really, and on that level, there are lots of pictures of the world of passion and the laws of karma. The second part is more about people are here beginning to see the truth and the light, and they're beginning to move up into a more holy realm. And there are also reliefs there that tell that story. The very interesting and beautiful piece right at the top on the roof of the temple represents the soul's departure from the body and the uniting with nirvana. And there you will see these circular forms, all stupas. There are 72 circles at the top of stupas, and inside of each of those there is a Buddha. It is also called the womb of the Buddhas as a result of this particular design and architecture. So as beautiful and magnificent as this is not what we're going to be building. We are going to be building something much more simple and humble out of marble, and we're going to build 7 of them going up the mountain. And the next picture will show something a little bit more, bringing us back to reality. And this is this beautiful, beautiful stupa on the bank of the Tsampo. And here's where I would like to hand over to Venerable Sunam, and she is going to tell you a little bit more about the stupas, that the design of the stupa that we are going to choose, and she's going to go into the detail of how we put that together. So Sunam, all yours.
Thank you, Hanli. Very beautiful journey through time and space. I think this is a very beautiful, very, as you said, very humble and modest example. And I believe that most of us have exactly that shape in mind when we are talking about a stupa. I have been in West China. They are all over, in every corner, on every mountain. Because we also plan to build the 7 stupas up the hill. And there was one question in an earlier stupa series: why are stupas always built so high on top? And I can imagine 2 reasons for that. The first one is really a pilgrimage. It is a place where you go and look for help and ask for help. And most of the time, this includes really some kind of pilgrimage before. So on top of the mountain is the perfect place that people can go there. And in the sense of meaning, it represents the Buddha. And you also know the rule that if you have a statue at home or in a temple, it should always be the highest place where the Buddha is. But first, I would like to clarify the different words we are using for the stupas and have developed over time. So the first one is stupa. It comes from Sanskrit. And depending on which books you read, it is really said that the stupa was invented as the grave for the Buddha's body when he left Earth. Other scripture says it was already used in a similar form before Buddha left Earth for holy beings. So then the second one, which is also used quite often, Chatya, it refers more to a temple-like building where the stupa is inside. So this is really a building where people can go inside. And then there is the stupa inside, comes also from the Indian tradition. And then the pagodas are the multi-level ones in Japan, in China. And these are also often used that people can go inside. And inside there is often the representation of a Buddha. But it also follows very strict rules in the sense of symbolism. And Hanli and I had really a hard time for this talk that we only talk about architecture. In our next talk in September, we will talk about all the symbolism. And then Churton is the word, the Tibetan word for the stupa. And the meaning is also like a vessel ready to take something. And Buddhism came to Tibet in the 8th century by Padmasambhava. And then really flourished in the 11th century when Atisha came. And they also brought from India the forms and shapes of the stupas. And we have seen them, Hanli have shown them, most of them have been the bell-shaped ones. And you know, the West China people are quite traditional. And also they keep the lineage pure. So there was not much development till today. The stupas, the shape looks more or less the same since centuries. They know 8 main forms of stupas. And each one represents an event in Buddha's life. if you have a single stupa, most of the time, it's the enlightenment stupa, this one. It represents when Buddha got enlightened under the Bodhi tree. We also decided to build 7 of the enlightenment stupas. And each one will then be dedicated to a special medicine Buddha, one of the medicine Buddhas. And in the next picture, you see that's if somebody builds more stupas, sometimes they choose to build one of each of the 8 types. But you see in the shape, not much difference. I go back to the other one. Only one has a different shape with really a bell here. All others have this vessel. And the main difference is how these steps are designed and decorated. But now we have learned so much about building stupas in the last month.
Yeah, because there's not a book that's stupa for dummies.
So how do you build a stupa in the Tibetan lineage? First of all, everybody is astonished because it's a wide screen. If you look more detailed, there is a double dorje here on the ground. So the first thing you do a ceremony and you mark this double dorje on the ground. So this is more or less the groundbreaking for each stupa. And then the second most important thing is like an axis. This is the center of the stupa. It's also called Yasti or Merudanda, or in Tibetan Sokching. Sometimes you also see the translation tree of life. So this is the center, this marks the center, this marks also that it is erected completely in a straight line. And it has an incredible symbolism. As said, we will talk separately about symbolism. First, we build it. Okay, what's next? Next, we build the stupa around this axis, the Yasti. And which parts can we identify? And when you look at these parts, you will find them more or less on each of the stupa. Han Li has shown as well. The foundation or the bottom part is called the throne. This part can be left out. As you have seen in the first bell-shaped one, there is no throne. They have not built a throne. In the terrace ones, this is very, very extensive and big. And in a few of the modern stupas, the throne is even as big that it is used as a temple, so that you can go inside and there is a meditation hall. The next part are the 4 steps. Big symbolism here, but these are the basis of every stupa. You have these in every stupa. Then the next one is the vase or the bumpa. On most of the stupas also we will have that. You have a cavity here where you can then put a statue inside, which has a beautiful decorated frame. Then the next part is called harmika. It's in the sense of architecture, it's like a pyramid upside down. Egyptian pyramid, Berta is looking at me. The Egyptian pyramid upside down because it goes up. It gets wider when you get up there. On the older ones, you have some kind of fence around it. And on the really old ones, that's more or less the top of the stupa. Then the next part is called the 13 discs. These are like your spine. You have the vertebrae, which are the bigger ones. And in between, you have smaller ones. So in total, there are 26 of the discs. They left out the female to count them. They only counted the 13 ones, and they narrow down. The next one is the umbrella holder and the umbrella. So really, part of the architecture is only the umbrella holder. The umbrella itself, in former times, you can see it here with this nice little flaps on the picture, was in early time fabric. And in the more modern ones, it is made out of brass, but it really looks like a very beautiful decorated Indian parasol. And then we have the jewel, the sun, and the moon. We all know the metaphors of the moon in the scriptures. The 3 together have deep symbolism as well. Please come back in September for all the symbolism.
And I just want to say, Ella, I'm sorry that I confused you. There is no book. We wish there was a book for building a stupa for dummies, but there isn't.
I will.
Miriam was going to tell you all the stories about how we had to get all this information.
Yeah. This is, thank you for asking. That's really very, very interesting. The Tibetans have jotted down how a stupa is built, but they wrote it in words. And and that's why it also, it has been passed on over the centuries. So that's why the shape has not changed. There are slight difference in the different schools, as we know, in the lineages. But everything is written down in a book. And we are using a book. Oh, where have I the name? Who has written the book? Maybe it's on the next slide. Oh no, let me go back before I forget that, because we have another important part. I don't forget to mention the scripture.
Gotcha.
This is also a very important part. That's why we built the stupa. We have cavities in the stupa where you fill in the relics of holy beings, lots of blessed mantras. And especially this part of the cavity, which is directly under the axis, is where you put the most holy relics. And Han Li has forbidden to tell me anything, but we have beautiful relics, which we will tell you later on. And this has also influence on the building process. So you build the throne, you have your cavity, you fill all the relics and mantras in, and then you seal this cavity with a ceremony, and then you can build the next part of the stupa, where you have again cavities. This time we have two, because in the middle we have the axis. Same process as before. You build the part of the 4 steps. You fill in the mantras and the relics. You seal it, and then you can build the next part of the stupa. Same procedure here. Okay. Now we go about how is it described in the scripture that how the stupa looks like. And as said, the proportions are beautiful. They have been passed down since centuries in Tibet. And I think you look at the stupa and the beauty itself is incredible. It has incredible deep spiritual meaning, each part. And even seeing a stupa, you need to have incredible good karma. And help building a stupa like you all do is such a good karma, it's uncountable. But now back to the squares. They don't have any measurements in the book how you build the stupa. Their measurement is a square. So everything is counted in squares. The stupa is 64 squares high. The basis is 42 squares wide. You see, I already know them by heart. And everything is calculated in these squares. At the first part, that's easy because also the building blocks are squares. It gets very complicated when we get to the discs. It took us 2 weeks back and forth to figure out the exact angles. The widths, as you can see here, these discs, they are not longer in square measurements. You have 13 squares, and we need to put there a little bit more than, I think even more than 13. 26 discs, so it really gets complicated. And you have the measurement between the female and the male only in proportion. The angle of the female disc is different from the angle of the male discs. So that was quite an interesting process. I got the description. We jotted everything down. The architect helps us to put it in this beautiful digital format. We send it back to the spiritual advisors. They checked it back with the corrections, and so we have, but now we have the final form approved by our spiritual advisor. And also you can see here the description even of the sun, the moon, and the jewel is in writing. And here you can also see more details about the axis implemented. The axis is wooden. And it lives in some kind of sheet where you put it in. Like a sword in the sheet. But you have to leave room because there will be also mantras filled in. And the axis switches its form. In the bottom, it's a square. And then at one point, it becomes a circle. And the tip reaches up to the jewel. You can see here they have stopped drawing it because we need to figure out how big it is. So it's really, it starts off like this and then really gets like more or less like the tip of a needle. And also there are lots of ceremonies involved, exact directions. It has many different aspects, and I personally find it very beautiful to bring together architecture, meaning, ceremonies, and especially Hanli and me, we are really working hard because you don't bring it all together, you also have to plan it that everything happens at the right time. Yeah. So that's it about stupas in time and space. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Meanwhile, we have questions from our last live streams, and till you put your questions in the chat, I try to answer a few of them.
So I'll ask them and you can answer them. How's that? So the first one, is that the one, is there any difference among the stupas or are they all going to be alike?
We built all 7 stupas in the form of the Enlightenment stupa. The difference will be that we will choose for each stupa a different marble. Marco has shown all these different marble types in our last live stream. And there will be a different statue in the cavity where you put the statue.
So I'm going to keep going until everyone else thinks about questions. Could you tell us what is the interest of the donor?
A very beautiful question. Thank you so much. I think I already mentioned it. You need to have incredibly good karma to see a stupa. So can you imagine what karma you create by helping to build a stupa? And we have a beautiful list on our stupa update. No, it's on our stupa page. Sorry, I don't even know my own homepage. On the stupa page, on the Diamond Mountain side, there are the 18 benefits listed if you support building a stupa. More or less, the summary is your whole life will improve and you will proceed on the path very quickly.
Right, I'm going to keep on asking. So there, are we going to build 7 or 8 stupas? And also, will people be able to walk to the top?
That's one for you, I would say, Hanli.
Okay, great. So yes, we are going to be building 7 stupas. And they will follow the shape of the Big Dipper, which is a star constellation. We've plotted those already with GPS, exactly where they're going to be, and they go from where the temple is now in the lower campus, which some of you might know, up to the first hill in front of the temple, then down along the side of the mountain to the left. It crosses down over the wash and it goes right to the top of the mountain, or just below the top of the mountain. And there's a very good reason for that. So yes, as a pilgrim, you'll be able to walk from stupa to stupa along a walking path all the way up to the mountain top, where there will be a very small temple, and then you can walk all the way down again.
Thank you, Hanli. I also put in the chat the link to the Stupa series. If you watch the Stupa series where we had invited the architects, they explain exactly where the stupas are placed, and you see the pictures, how it is all over the mountain.
Yep, wonderful. Here's a very interesting one for you, Sunam. What's the difference between a temple and a stupa?
A stupa has no worldly benefit for us. You cannot go in. It's a monument. It's only dedicated to spiritual reasons. A place of offering, a place of praise for the being you dedicate and build it for. A temple has both meanings. It's a building where you practice. You can go inside. It keeps the rain and the wind and the sun away. Yes, you have also a lot of spiritual meanings and things and statues inside. But most temples, I would say, are built for the purpose that you gather there and practice. Good. Maybe one or two more.
I see that there are questions here about donating and putting people's names on or near the stupa, if that's beneficial to them, and if it would make the situation better, specifically because these are also medicine Buddha stupa.
Yeah.
Can you answer that yet?
So we are dedicating our stupas to the medicine Buddha, and the action that you support this stupa will have the karma that you plant incredible good health seeds. If maybe it's not, how should I say, strategically good, but if the names are put on a donor wall, I am not sure if this has additional karmic effect. I think the most important is your motivation. And you need to think that if you help support to build a stupa, that's not a one-time, one seed karma. These stupas should last for hundreds and hundreds of years. Every person who visits the stupa and is influenced in a positive way by it, for each of these persons, you get more good karma. It's like bringing money to the bank and get interest for the next 500 years.
And that, I think, is also a good time to explain why it is that we are being so careful with making sure we design it properly. And Venerable Sulam has been spending lots and lots of time making sure that that happens, designing the whole project, and to make sure that those stupas are well built and will last forever.
And we stick to all the spiritual rule sets which are involved with it. Yeah. Here also both, in a worldly sense, build it for the next 500 years or more, but also build them correctly in the spiritual sense. Good. I think then we should wrap up. And as you know, normally you get the latest number for the month. So the actual state of donations is 2,243,381. So we have reached a point where we can start building the first one. Thank you so much to all supporters. So this is, you find this also on the Stupa update page. This is the numbers by country. Taiwan is leading. Oh, Malaysia is missing. Malaysia is the third one. Malaysia is giving Singapore a tough race. And also special thanks to Vietnam. You guys are incredible. Then expenses at the moment, nothing very big there, because the big expenses will start in the next 2 months when we really start with construction and give the orders out there. You find all these updates on the Stupa update page. I have shown it already. Let me go there again. So when you go to the Diamond Mountain website, you find the Stupa project on the upper right. Then you find here the general information about the Stupa project. And then you click on the latest updates. By the way, you can select your own language. There you find all the series we have done so far. Let me reload it. And then you find the actual status of the donations. That's more or less the last day. And then you find these pictures I have shown you about by country and the expenditures.
There is a question in the chat about when the stupas will be completed. So that depends on how steadily the funds come in. And so we've been very, very fortunate to get to where we are now so that we can build the first stupa and do all the planning, make sure we can order the marble, design, and then begin to build the first stupa. We are hoping that over the next 3 years, we can complete them all. But that will very much depend on making sure we get to the 10 million, because each stupa is roughly around $1.5 million. US dollars. So, Mariluz, I hope that answered your question.
Good. I sent the link to the site where you find all the updates. And then our next talk in September is about the meaning and the correlations of all the different parts of the stupa. And then thank you for joining. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being interested in what's happening. We love it.
Absolutely.
And then see you in September. And if you are inspired to donate to the stupas, please do so.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sunam. It was great.
Thank you, Hanli. Thank you to all the translators. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the tech people for the recordings. And thank you especially to Tatiana, who is always taking care of organizing it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you in September. And maybe we meet each other in 10 minutes in the Diamond Cutter translation program. Bye.